Welcome to the SBI Podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Welcome, SBI Podcast listeners and video podcast viewers. My name is Greg Alexander, and I am the CEO of SBI, a sales and marketing consulting company dedicated to helping you make your number. This is the weekly SBI podcast, and its purpose is to help you make your number by getting your peers to share with you how they make theirs. Today's guest is John Myers, who is the CEO of Rentokil Initial, one of the largest business services companies in the world, with 60,000 employees across 60 countries. John is responsible for the $500 million North American pest control and interior landscaping business. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg. Great to be here.
Okay, today we're going to ask John to help his peers set their companies up for success by discussing how to develop and execute a revenue growth strategy. We're going to use a section of SBI's revenue growth methodology to guide our conversation, specifically Step 2, Corporate Strategy, which can be found on pages 51 to 70 if you're following along at home. If you've yet to download a copy of this methodology, you can find it at salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 report. Okay, let's jump into it. I'm going to lay some foundation here for us, and John, my first question to you is, if you could explain to the audience, why does your company exist? What is your mission, and how was this determined?
A great question, and a lot of people don't even think about talking about mission statements as part of their strategy. They think it's sort of old-fashioned, maybe like poster material, and on the other hand, we think it's very important. And our mission is protecting people and enhancing lives. And we do this delivery by providing pest control services and interior landscaping and a new business we've just launched called Brand Standard Auditing to over 500,000 customers using about 4,000 highly trained professionals that are spread throughout all of North America.
Okay, so the third business is what again?
Brand Standard Auditing. So simply put is we help customers ensure that what they think is going on in their operations, everything from fast food restaurants to grocery stores to the like, to confirm what they think is going on in their operations from a food safety and a workplace safety standpoint, as well as the type of customer service that they provide is really going on.
Very cool. I didn't know you guys were in that business, and I can see...
Just got in it.
Yeah, it makes logical sense for you, for sure. All right, so we understand the mission. Okay,
Yep.
Let's move to the vision now. So what is the vision for your business, and how was it developed? What do you want this company to become?
Yeah, it's the old, you just want to be the biggest, and, although we've grown by 300% in the past 7 years, it's never really just been about the biggest. Instead, our focus has been about this concept of the right people doing the right things in the right way. And our view is if we get that focus right and work on the three constituents that are served by that, which we call colleagues, so that's what we call our employees. But if we get our constituents focus right related to colleagues and customers and shareholders, really good things happen.
Yeah, great. Right people, right things the right way, okay?
Exactly.
Very simple to understand. So let's take that concept and let's think about your sales team for a moment. And let's have a conversation around values. Specifically, how do you want your team to behave? So if that is your vision, right people, right things, right way, how do you make sure that when your sales team engages with customers, the customers experience that?
Great question, because if it's just going to be poster material once again, it's not going to get adopted, and it's never going to resonate at the customer level. So as part of our right people, right things, right way focus, we've identified a set of promises And so we have a colleague promise, and we have a customer promise, and we have a shareholder promise. And I know this concept of promises may be considered a little bit old-fashioned, but we really like the idea of the thought that we step up and we make promises to these three constituents about what we believe in and what we will do. And you probably note that we identified the colleague promise in front of the customer promise. And we did that on purpose. I mean, I know that it's a little bit controversial, maybe the customer's king, and therefore, why wouldn't you have the customer promise in front of the colleague promise? But we've determined that if we get the right colleagues or the right people doing the right things in the right way, guess what? The customer delivery is really well understood and hence delivered. And so in our promises, we make a set of promises, everything from safety. As a matter of fact, the first promise we make throughout the group is safety. So promises to our colleagues, promises to our customers, and also the shareholders about safety. We also talk about the transparency of communications, and so honest and upfront about things. We talk about respect. So we have a very clear set of company values that our sales teams use to explain our value proposition. And that, we believe, drives the way that they interact with their customers.
Yeah, I love it. I love the term promises. In fact, later on in the show, I'm going to ask you about your brand promise, but let's save that for the next segment. What I love about the word promise is nobody wants to break a promise, right? So if I'm an employee and you communicate, my leader, my CEO communicates a promise, I'm going to buy in because I don't want to be that guy or that girl who breaks that promise. It's a great concept.
I think you're absolutely right.
Right. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, John and I will discuss brand development, financial objectives, and market selection. And this bolts on the back of mission, vision, and values as part of our revenue growth methodology. So stick around after the break. You are watching SBI TV. This is a monthly web TV show featuring guests just like you, executives trying to grow their revenues. Each month, you can peek behind the scenes and watch your peers discuss their strategies for how they make their numbers. You are not going to want to miss this. Welcome back. My name is Greg Alexander, and I'm the CEO of SBI. And my guest today is John Myers, who is the CEO of Rentokil Initial. Today we are discussing the development and execution of a revenue growth strategy, and we're using SBI's revenue growth methodology to do it, pages 51 to 70 in this year's report if you're keeping up at the office. Before the break, John shared with us how he laid the foundation for growth by clearly determining the company's mission, its vision, and its values, the way that he wants his colleagues to behave when in front of customers and with each other. As John mentioned, some might view that as old-fashioned. I'm not one of those people. I think you cannot grow revenue without those three things in place. This segment, we're going to come maybe from 30,000 feet to 10,000 feet, and we're going to hear from John how he develops the Rentokil brand, how he determines financial objectives, and how he determines which markets to compete in, and most importantly, which ones to avoid and why. So John, what is your brand promise that you make to your customers? How did you develop it? And really, why should I believe it?
The last part's a really good one, isn't it? Yeah. Our brand promise is tied to three principles. The words we use and our service, relationship, and teamwork. And the definitions we use really kind of pull this together to make it real and something that's believable. So service, we define as we are passionate about delivering excellent customer service to every customer. And I'll just take a moment or two to explain what that means in our world. First of all, if you're not passionate about doing this, go do it somewhere, do something somewhere else. And the other part is you know, we said excellent customer service to every customer, but we also believe in charging a premium price for that. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of models out there where it's low cost and low price, and it usually means low service. And we think that's a really good model in certain industries. We happen to be on the other end. We think that what our customers want is excellent customer service, and the value proposition would support a premium price. The second area that we talk about is relationships, and our definition is that we value productive and long-lasting relationships with our colleagues and customers. So our efforts, of course, are to retain our customers and have these long-lasting relationships. But you'll note that in the definition, I said colleagues first, customers second. And once again, you know, that can be considered a little controversial, but because we're in the service industry, we believe if we get the colleague thing right, then the customer service delivery is right, and we'll have those long-lasting relationships. Mm-hmm. And then the last piece, teamwork, is really a recognition that these are complicated businesses to run because we're in a decentralized structure spread throughout North America. So we have to work together to deliver great results. And one of the things we use to try to describe that as a visual is a set of gears. And the sales folks are out there attempting to sell new business, but once sold, that's just one turn of the gear, if you will. And the other gears are tied to whether we work well together at all levels to deliver what the sales reps have sold. Mm-hmm. So that's how we get it going out there in the field. Mm-hmm.
So I will tell you, my reaction to that is I do believe your brand promise because you're able to articulate it, and it's getting validated every day. How so?
Yes.
Well, you said you're going to deliver excellent customer service, not good, but excellent. And in order to do that, you have to charge a premium because those things cost money. If your customers didn't pay you the premium, then your brand promise is not believable, but they're paying it to you, which means your brand promise is believable. And I'm taking the time to explain that because those that are listening or watching, challenge yourself with that. You know, what is your brand promise? Can you articulate it? And are you backing it up? Is it being validated or is it just talk? Which is really encouraging to hear John's comments on this. And it's a great lead into my next question, which is around financial objectives. So if you have this goal of delivering excellent customer service and you're prioritizing your colleagues ahead of your customers because you are in the people business, happy, engaged employees equals happy, engaged customers. You know, and you're in a decentralized environment, probably with decentralized P&Ls and general managers running businesses. It's complicated. So how do you determine the financial objectives that the company must meet? What are the non-negotiables?
Yeah, that's another great question. So it really starts with a bit of a culture. And first of all, I'll describe us as we're definitely a scoreboard company, meaning we measure our results, constantly trying to improve our results. And that's sort of who we are. And each year we identify the strategies for the next 3 years. So we have a rolling 3-year strategic plan that we work towards, and then we identify the initiatives to support those strategies, and then these outputs then drive what we call a bottoms-up budget for the coming year. And I think it's worth pointing out that we start with the strategy first and let the budget be the output, rather than the output is the strategy. In other words, I've been in companies where we said, all right, we grew by 4% in revenue and 6% in profit. So next year, why don't we try to do 5 and 8? And then you stand around and you try to come up with the strategies that are going to allow you to accomplish that. Well, I think that's really backwards.
Yeah,
I think
agree.
You start with the strategies first, and you then determine what the outputs would be in the on the budget side. Mm-hmm. And if you do that, by the way, it's a much more supportable message when you say, hey, I expect you to grow 10% in revenue, and I expect the profits to grow by 20%.
Yeah, I agree. And, and when you're having these negotiations on budgets, which can be dysfunctional, right? Being able to explain to somebody who you're giving a target to how the number was calculated and how it was a derivative of the strategy can be a very powerful thing.
Exactly.
When you're determining, so this 3-year rolling strategy, which I love, another old-fashioned thing that you're doing, but a great thing. I mean, these days people can't look past 3 weeks, let alone 3 years. When you're doing this, central to that is determining which markets you're going to compete in and which ones you're not going to participate in and why. So tell the audience a little bit about market selection as part of that 3-year rolling strategy process.
It's interesting. The segments we operate in, the 3 businesses I described, we're in a very unique situation. I think we have pretty much unlimited growth potential due to the size of the markets and our relatively low market share. Even though, in pest control, we're number 3 in the country. Interior landscaping, we're number 1. Brand standards, we're number 1. But because it's a very decentralized business, we've got unlimited upside. So what we decided to do is use an old school approach called the quadrant approach to drive our efforts. And we've kind of rebranded them to make them fit this new world. But we have quadrants called the emerging quadrant, the growth quadrant, what we call protect and enhance, and manage for value. And they help us to shape the strategies that we focus on. So kind of give you a bit of an example. If we were in an emerging market, so that's in a market that we would define where it's a big market that's growing and we have low market share, our strategies will be to invest in sales reps and marketing, because our whole goal to grow there has to be new customer attraction, right? And in a protect and enhance market which we define as we've got relatively high market share and the market's not growing, we don't want to invest in sales reps because the ability to get new customers is really limited. But our investments might be in upgrading the level of service that we're able to provide, because our growth might be driven strictly off of customer retention. Also could be based on pricing. So as you upgrade your service levels, you can charge a little bit more. So we use the quadrant approach to drive our strategies.
Love it. I really do. And that example that you gave us and tying it back to sales in the emerging growth when it's about new customer acquisition, that warrants a sales investment. In contrast, in the protect business, not that business is not important to you, it's very important to you, it's probably a source of cash flow. It's about holding on to those customers, making sure they have a great experience so that they continue to buy from you. So great example. For those that are listening that are not CEOs like John, here's what I would tell you to do. Walk into your CEO's office and say, what's the 3-year strategy? And hopefully your CEO can give you an answer as crisply as John just did, and maybe he has his own tool that he uses. John uses the 4-quadrant approach, which is great. Your company might use something else. But you've got to understand your CEO strategy before you can build your sales strategy and at what we're talking about today, your revenue growth strategy. Okay, we're going to take...
Exactly right.
Yep, excellent. Okay, we're going to take a quick short break here, and when we return, we're going to focus on how to name and defeat your competitors and how to develop sustained competitive advantages. So come back after the break. We're going to continue the dialogue.
Do you have too many things to do and not enough time to do them? Is finding time to learn best practices almost impossible? The SBI Podcast is your solution. Turn time spent exercising, commuting, and traveling into productive learning time with a subscription to the SBI Podcast. SBI Podcast listeners get unique insight into real-world sales and marketing issues through interviews with your industry peers every week. Find us on iTunes by searching for Sales Benchmark Index Podcast and subscribe today.
Welcome back. My name is Greg Alexander, and I'm the CEO of SBI. My guest today is John Myers, the CEO of Rentokil Initial. Today we are discussing how to develop and execute a revenue growth plan During this segment, we're going to hear from John how to develop a competitive strategy and how to develop sustainable competitive advantage. I really want to emphasize the word here, sustainable. Many of the business models that have been sustainable for years are rapidly deteriorating in our eyes. For example, if you're a product company, you used to have a 5-year product life cycle. Maybe now you only have a 1-year product life cycle, and so it goes. So sustainable is the key word here, and sustainable competitive advantage. So John, let me bring you back into the conversation here. So how do you define the competition in each of these markets that you compete in?
Well, first of all, we start first by identifying the segments that we want to operate in, and then we identify the competitors that operate in those specific segments. And just a plug for SBI. So we had this concept swirling around in our head, but when we brought in SBI, they helped us to identify segments that were profitable, segments that we had longer tenure with when we got them as a customer, rather than saying, hey, all segments are equally the same. So we started off with that little bit of a differentiation about where do we want to play, and then we just focus on those competitors that play in those segments.
Right. Okay, and in your business, is it safe to assume that it's a mature business, so therefore there's relatively speaking, a small number of customers and therefore a small number of competitors, and therefore identifying who the competitors is easy, or is that not true, especially as you expand into these emerging growth markets?
Yeah, it's tricky, actually. So each segment, so let's just say in healthcare, is a very, very different segment from fast food restaurants. Mm-hmm. I'm just using pest control as an example. Both of those segments require the service, but they have very different demands. Mm. And the one thing that you're always challenged with when you run a sales department or if you're running a business is you have a limited amount of capital, either financial or human capital. And so you've got to apply it in a very specific way. And we've tried it the other way, where we're going to try to do it across, 28 segments, healthcare, fast food restaurants, office buildings, you name it. And what we found was you just get such a weak effort because you're so spread so thin. And so I think what you do is you find the segments you're more likely to win in, and then you take your limited resources and you focus more clearly on those.
Yep. Okay, fantastic. Yep. So in terms of competition, so you've done that, okay? So you went from trying to compete in 28 to competing in a smaller number. And through that analysis is how the competitors revealed themselves to you?
Yeah, and by the way, we learn a lot about the competitors from our customers. Mm. And we have a really simple saying around here. If your competitors are talking to your customers more often than you are, bad things are going to happen, okay? Period. So we try to stay close to our customers at multiple levels so that they can tell us what's going on within their own business, but also the value propositions they're hearing from our competition.
Yep. Excellent. So let's talk about that. So you're talking to your customers, which is great, and you want to talk to them more than your competitors, which I love that phrase. So they're coming at you, okay, with an offense, which means you've got to play defense. Right. And get your offense back on the field. So how do you develop your defense?
Well, I mean, two things. There's nothing like not winning up on a proposition. So your value proposition isn't chosen to really understand whether what you have is working for a customer. And so when we don't win, we probably learn more than when we do win. I know that sounds crazy because, sometimes it's funny. When we analyze our results, we don't analyze the positive variances at the same rate and for us, a ferocious nature as when we lose. And the same thing happens here. When we don't win, we look really hard at why we didn't win, and then we adjust the offering accordingly. So it's a sort of a offense-defense response probably, but one responds to another.
Well, I think the big learning there for our audience is we learn more from our failures than we do our successes. I mean, that's true in all walks of life. And making sure that you are humble enough that when you don't win, you take the time to understand why and then pour that information back into your strategy. You know, that allows me, that process you just described to me, allows me to consolidate a couple of questions that I had notated here that I was going to ask you down to my last one, which is this issue of false differentiation.
Yeah.
So sometimes we cook up these value propositions in these positioning statements, you know, how we're different versus the bad guys, you know, in our own laboratory, and then we take it out into the market. We think we're superior based on X, Y, Z. We realize we're not. How do you, as the leader of the organization, make sure that, you know, you don't read your own press clippings and you stay true to real differentiation?
Yeah, it's funny. I think two words come to mind right away. The word humble that you used earlier, really good. We think humility probably keeps you straight. The other word is paranoia. We're always worried someone is out there trying to outsmart us, that has figured out a different way to do what we do. And I don't mean price. I mean, you know, just a better way. So we're always trying to figure out what they're doing, what the customer wants, and we're humble enough to know, hey, there's folks out there that are pretty darn smart, so we should stay close to them.
Yeah, very good. You know, if you're thinking about differentiation, audience members, and you're wondering, is it false or is it real? Here's some things to think about. So first is you can't have uneconomic differentiation. So what do I mean? You think you're different. For example, in John's case, he's going to supply excellent service, not good service. So therefore, he's charging a premium. Well, if the customers don't pay the premium, then you have uneconomic differentiation. You're lying to yourself. You may think it's superior, but it's not so superior that somebody's willing to pay you a premium for it. Another form of false differentiation is unsustainable differentiation. So maybe you have a lead for 6 months or a year, and then next thing you wake up and your lead, you know, the competitors have caught up to you or maybe even have surpassed you. So is it unsustainable differentiation? You know, I think it was Warren Buffett that once said you want to put a moat around your business so that it's, you know, if you try to cross the moat, you might get eaten by the dragon. So these are the types of things to think about as it thinks about differentiation. Okay, we're going to take one last break. When we come back, John and I will discuss what to do next if you are focused on developing and executing a revenue growth strategy. So the takeaway value is right after the break. Stick around, we'll be right back.
Making your number is hard. Your problems are complex. Complex problems need complex solutions. Introducing the SBI Magazine. Read in-depth stories written by award-winning journalists about how your peers have overcome their problems to make the numbers. When you need more than a tweet, social post, or blog article, turn to the SBI Magazine. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com to subscribe.
Welcome back, everyone. All right, John, we're on the home stretch. This is our last segment here. I would like to conclude our time together today with some practical advice, of which you've already given us lots of. So let me ask you one final question that will allow you to summarize your thoughts. So here it is. If you were hired by a company tomorrow as their CEO, and you were tasked by the board with getting a company who is not growing the top line to start growing again, what would you do first, second, and third?
All right. Well, it's probably pretty basic stuff, but I would start with clearly understanding the product or service. Is it truly needed by the marketplace? And, you know, just because companies are in business today doesn't mean that the market hasn't passed them by. And I do that through observation. You can't do that in an office. So you got to get in front of customers. Got to see your product or service being pitched and accepted or turned down to really understand whether you've got something that's relevant to the marketplace. So that'd be the first one. The second one relates to can your organization, up and down, but clearly the sales team and the service teams that are delivering, can they do they understand the value proposition that you're providing? I mean, can they articulate why a customer should do business with us? Can they articulate why a customer should continue to do business with us? And once again, I only think you can see that through observation. And it's amazing. We think that our teams understand the value proposition, but until you're out there listening to how they're explaining why a customer should buy or a customer should stay with us, you just don't know. Yeah. And then the last one is a bit of the mechanics of the business, but you got to reconfirm that your go-to-market strategy is still relevant to the market you're trying to serve. And the simple example would be, someone recently asked me, what's my fax machine number? And I started laughing. I said, boy, I don't know. I'm not even sure we have a fax machine.
Yeah.
And so, if your go-to-market strategy was developed during the, invention of the fax machine, I think your customers have changed the way that they want to transact. And if your go-to-market strategy hasn't been adjusted since that time period, I think you're at risk.
Yeah.
So this whole concept of making sure your strategy is still relevant is a really important part. So those are sort of the three top things that come to mind.
I think there are three great things. I'll tell you a funny story, and this is not understanding if you're relevant the other way. So I'm in New York City, and I'm in the back of a taxi cab, and I get to my location, and I go in my wallet, and I pull out my dollar bills to pay, and I hand the guy two 20s and ask him for change. He can't give me change. And I start yelling at him like a jerk and saying, I can't believe you're a taxi cab guy and you can't give me change. And he points to this credit card processing machine on the back of the plexiglass separating him and I. And it dawned on me that I was the person that was outdated at that point in time. And these days, the way you pay for a taxi cab is by swiping a credit card. So,
exactly right.
Yeah, and another story about the fax machine there, so that's interesting. Mm-hmm. All right, let me give you my 2 cents, audience. So if you're like most companies, you think you have a well-developed revenue growth strategy, but let me shoot you straight, you don't. Most likely, the corporate strategy is understood only by the senior executive team, and the employee base is operating in silos, using yesterday's playbook on a daily basis. What you really have is a series of tactics that you've been relying on for years that no longer work very well. Unfortunately, this causes companies to miss their number too often because the CEO's strategy does not get translated into product strategy, a marketing strategy, and a sales strategy that drive growth. We call this strategic misalignment, and it's plaguing many companies. Hopefully, John's example today will help you get started in the right direction, and you won't suffer from this, and you'll move away from tactics masquerading as a strategy, and you'll develop a real revenue growth strategy and put real effort around things like, why do we exist, i.e., what's my mission? What do we want to be when we grow up, i.e., what's my vision? How do we want to behave, i.e., what are our values? And making sure through observation, which John mentioned several times, which I want to reinforce, is you're out in the field and you're seeing, do your customers understand your value proposition? If the answer is no, that's probably because your service personnel and your sales personnel aren't articulating it well. And it's your job as the CEO and an executive to drive that through the organization. So here are a couple of resources for you if you want to get to work on this. So first, I would tell you to get a copy of this year's research report if you haven't already. It's titled How to Make Your Number in 2016. You can get it at salesbenchmarkindex.com/research. /2016-report. And this is what we used today. So if today's was valuable to you and you want to do it more systematically, get the report. If after you get the report and you're going through it and you need some help and you think it might be beneficial to have an expert from our company take you through a workshop to help you determine these things and help you figure out how to upgrade your revenue growth strategy, go to salesbenchmarkindex.com 2016 workshop, and we'll send somebody out to see you. John, on behalf of my audience, you made a big contribution to our field today, so I wanted to personally thank you for taking the time being on the show.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
And a big thank you to our audience. I appreciate the attention you give me every week. I know you're busy. This show is now listened to by over 100,000 people. So squeezing me into your busy day is much appreciated. I view it as a privilege. And hopefully by having high quality guests like we had today, you'll continue to stay with us. So I'll conclude by wishing you much success as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.